This episode of The Move is not sponsored, and yet I want to tell you about something. If you are listening to this episode on the day that it actually aired, I want to invite you to join us for Internet Church tonight. That is May 20. We're gathering for Internet Church. And the way that you get in touch with that, get the private link to join our community live, is to text Internet Church to the number 808-204-4372. That's text the words Internet Church to 808-204-4372. Welcome back to The Move, where I've been through the book 10 minutes at a time. I'm your host, Justin Khoe, and in today's episode, we're looking at that one time in the Bible that Jacob dies and he wants to be buried in a cave. For warning, what are we looking at? Genesis chapter 49, verses 29 all the way to 33. My guest for this last episode, this last chunk of this series is Pastor Harold. Pastor Harold, you're looking confused. Did I say something wrong?
No, I think I read more than I was assigned to. Never mind that.
Couple things. This is our last time we get to hang out for this season, and I'm sad. I'm also happy because we get a tiny little bit of a break. We've been hammering out the book of Genesis. You and I have been talking about how, dude, like if you wanted the equivalent of a doctorate in ministry, we could just listen to The Move. That's a joke. That's not true. That's not a claim.
Not true.
But we were reflecting on and actually reading a message from someone on Instagram. You know who you are. Just shout outs to you, that person. I appreciate the message that you sent me on Instagram. How they have been following along The Move for the last couple of months and feel like they've learned more in these 3 months than, a couple of decades of being at church. And let's say that person, this is not an indictment on that person's pastor. It's maybe they're more like me as a kid growing up in the church system. You went to church every week, but you probably fell asleep and just like passed out in the pews. That was me. So I totally get the idea, but just to reflect on the fact that people have been working with us through the entire book of Genesis, like that's just a wild concept. And how much fun has that been? And Harold, just want to say thank you for showing up. This is the last time for this season of The Move that you're going to be on the show.
Thank you for the invitation. It's been absolutely great. And I don't think that it's an indictment of, just to bounce off that comment of a person that's got a couple of decades out of these 3 months. I mean, even for me personally, I've been, I've learned a lot from this time, not just in the preparation for the times that we've had, that we've participated together, but also in listening to everybody that contributes to this season. I've learned, man, there's been some just beautiful, beautiful insights that I had not seen. And listen, I've been pastoring for almost 20 years now. So,
wow.
and I grew up in the church, just like you. My dad's a theologian. He's a PhD nerd. He's an Old Testament scholar. And so there's been some beautiful insights that I've been able to hear from the other folks that do this, Jonathan, Kisserain, Tyler, Benjamin. It's just been beautiful. So thank you for the invitation and doing this.
Absolutely. It's been a privilege. I feel like I owe you an apology because it's our last time recording for this season. Mm-hmm. I gave you like 4 verses, and I feel like, man, maybe that wasn't the right way to do it. Unfortunately, that's just it is what it is. Oh no! You know what? I did this wrong. I'm looking at my notes here, and I'm realizing that the Google Sheet is the cell has been shortened, and so we actually are going all the way up to verse 13. You probably read the correct amount of text.
I did.
That's why you looked at me all kind of confused. So we are looking at Genesis 49:29 all the way to 50:13.
Yes.
We're talking about death, and I'm wondering if you have spent much time thinking about the way that you would like to die. I'm sure you've thought about the way that you don't want to die, right? You don't want to die like screaming and flailing about as your plane goes down, right? Like that's probably one of the ways. What are the ways that you want to avoid death? Do you think?
Jesus. Drowning, for sure drowning.
If you had to choose between drowning or being burned alive, that's always the one that's hard.
Come on, why are we... What are we, 12?
Yes.
I don't know. It's rough. I actually almost drowned once in Lake Michigan. Yeah, it was rough.
You were trying to surf on Lake Michigan. That's what was going on.
Well, Lake Michigan can be very surfy, and it was my friend Daniel is the one who saved my life. He was on a date with who would end up being his wife, and I was third wheeling it. My wife was in Ecuador at the time, and we were at Lake Michigan just swimming along, and all of a sudden I got caught in an undercurrent, and he was actually swimming away with his girl. So they could have ignored my pleas, but somehow he heard me and came back and just kind of like plucked me out from the grip of death.
That may have been in no small part why they got married. I think that you have played an important role in positioning him as a heroic, manly kind of caretaker type of individual where maybe she was like, oh my goodness, this guy's good in a pinch. He's dependable. He's reliable. He's brave. He's willing to potentially put himself at risk for the sake of others. He's got good friends. Like maybe you can claim credit for their marriage.
Actually, I can claim credit for their marriage because I introduced them to each other.
There you go. Even better.
Yeah, no, I was like, they blame me and I take the blame happily for that.
That's
marriage.
awesome.
They're beautiful people. They live in Colorado. They're just wonderful people. So shout out if they ever listen to this. I love you too. So yeah.
So
but no, I haven't thought
you
too
don't
much
want to
of,
drown.
No, I don't want to
drown.
No.
Ideal way to pass away.
I think that if we think about the ideal way to pass away, it's probably as it's described here, surrounded by your loved ones. And most importantly, I think the ideal way for me would be either surrounded by your loved ones in peace or in your sleep. You just get, one of those like
don't wake up kind of things. Yeah,
fulminating heart attacks where you just go to bed, you didn't suffer. It sucks for the one who wakes up next to you though.
Yeah.
Like, that's rough. That's rough. So I don't think there's an ideal way to go other than the one that's described.
Let me push
here.
it one more round because I don't know if you thought about this, and this is like and turning into a whole episode about death. And I just meant this as an attention grabbing device, but I'm actually kind of curious.
Yeah.
Have you thought if you had to choose, if you had the opportunity to orchestrate, which one happens first, you passing first or your lovely wife passing first?
Guy.
I have had this conversation with Emily, and I said I absolutely do not want to outlive her. I don't know if my heart can take that. I'm not excited about the prospects of that. And this is going to make Emily sound so unempathetic, which is the exact opposite characteristic of her. But she's like, "Yeah, I think I could do that." I was like, "What?" So it's settled in our home. I'm hoping to pass before Emily does.
That's what
just
you
because
get.
She's the stronger person, apparently.
That's what you get. No, I have not. In my current life situation, with a 6-year-old and a 4-month-old, I would not want at all. And then I know she wouldn't want me because it's like no, I have not fantasized. Okay. I don't, and even without my girls, it's just no.
That sucks.
No. And then people start pressuring you to date again, and maybe you want to date because you're lonely, and you have to get used to other people's bad habits. And no. So
I hear you, and I understand the feelings and the yuckiness of it. And I think our culture, American culture, Western culture, is one where we don't handle the concept and the reality of death very well. It's one of those things that we actively do our best to avoid.
Right.
And yet, what I observe in this passage is Jacob doesn't seem to have these yucky feelings about death. Like he's very open. He's like, I'm going to die soon. I'm going to hang out with the ancestors. And here's what I want you to do. And it seems like a very like controlled. Yeah. Well, that's what he says. Soon I will die and join my ancestors. He's going to go join the ancestors. Feels like a Mulan movie right about now.
Right.
but okay, so I'm just having the observation that for him, death doesn't seem to be like this bad thing to avoid. He seemed to have made his peace with it. It makes me think of my great aunt. My great aunt passed away at the age of 106, 107, something along those lines. She never had children because she was part of the family that came from the Philippines to the United States. And the role that she played in our family unit was like everybody's caretaker. Like she was the nanny or the Lola, or the grandmother or the auntie to like everyone in the family. Like she took care of everyone's kid. She would just move from house to house to house to take care of kids. And what you described as like the ideal way to go away is what kind of she experienced. She woke up one day and was like, I think I'm good. Like, I think I've done enough and I'm at peace. And so she just chose one day to like stop eating. And it was very clear that, this is the choice that she's made. And in a very short window, all the family was gathered in the same home. And like within 24 hours later, they're just having this moment of prayer and singing songs. And she just goes to sleep, surrounded by her loved ones, like celebrating a life well lived. And that's kind of the picture that I get with Jacob, is that he's just there with his friends. He's there with his sons. He's there with his family. And it's not like he's there with the homies. He's going to go hang out with the ancestors. And it's like, you know what? Not that I'm looking forward to death or that anyone looks forward to death, but like if you got to go and at some point you kind of have to go, this is a good way to go.
Yeah. Just and I think that there is something else that the narrative pits out with the being gathered to the ancestors, which is an idiom of just being buried with everybody else.
Sure. Well, for him, he's trying to hang out with the ancestors in the cave, apparently.
Right, but like it's not like, at least the Bible doesn't illustrate like this picture of an afterlife that, they're all just swigging wine and just chilling.
Sure.
Ghosties, whatever. That's a whole other one. He's going to be gathered, and I think that the one that is really good and that points out is how certain he is of the promise of the inheritance.
Yeah.
Because remember that the entire narrative has been about the inheritance. Oddly enough, I'm preaching about the promise of inheritance made to Abram in Genesis 15. And it's all about the inheritance and the land that you will inherit. So Jacob is now saying, all right, listen, I'm gonna go be gathered to my ancestors. I want you to bury me in the cave. What cave? Well, in the cave where everybody is, where Abraham is, where and this is the other thing that struck me in the narrative. I was like, whoa, where Leah is, not Rachel, whom he loved dearly, not Rachel, who was this love of his life, but no, Leah. Like, Leah was the one that he is going to be buried next to, where Abraham is, where Sarah is, where Isaac and Rebekah, and where Leah is buried. And now he's going to go, and it's the assurance of the promise of the inheritance. Like, he's so sure about it that their ancestors will be there back in that place that he says, you need to take my bones and bury me in that cave so that I can be gathered with the ancestors, so that I can be buried with my people in the land that has been promised to us. And so they go. So if there is anything about not just a life well lived, like you're describing your auntie, your Lola, was that what you called her, Lola?
Lola is the word for a grandma, like abuela.
No,
even though she wasn't technically my grandmother. You know how that works.
Yeah, I know how it goes. La abuelita. Yeah. So not just a life well lived, but a life that is looking forward to the promise that has been promised. So to the fulfillment of a promise given. So it's not just like, well, I've lived the life well, I have seen my son, and now I'm going to go down in peace. But it's actually, I'm going to go down in peace, and I'm looking forward to the fulfillment of the promise that has been made to us. And that is why I need you to place my bones over there, because the promise is going to be fulfilled. And it's this echo also to Hebrews chapter 11, where they died not seeing, like, but like waiting and expecting the promises. And Jacob is expecting it in such a way that he wants a material, tangible experience. Not that you experience anything when you're dead, but a tangible thing to happen. That is, since this is going to happen, you're going to put my bones over there where all the other bones are, because we're going to be buried with our people in a land that at the time, remember, is not occupied by them. They're not living in it. They're actually in Egypt right now. So they've actually left the supposed inheritance that they're supposed to get. But so certain is Jacob that this is going to happen that he's like, that's where you're going to bury me. That's where you're going to put me.
What do you think? Because the narrative later is that Joseph asks for a couple days off of work, and Pharaoh's like, "Yeah, sure, go ahead, go to Canaan."
Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems like Joseph and his entire family. It says in verse 8 of 50, Joseph takes his entire household, his brothers,
except
and their households, all the kids,
except the kids. The kids stayed back.
Oh, and not the kids. Okay, sorry. A giant number of chariots and charioteers accompany Jordan. They all show up. What do you think that journey was intended to communicate to this caravan, if we can use that word?
Ooh.
They're leaving Egypt. They're wading into Canaan. There's this kind of memorial service, a 7-day period of mourning. I'm wondering maybe part of why Joseph was why Jacob was so interested in getting his family to do this is because perhaps there's some illustration, there's some lesson, something that he wants them to glean in leaving Egypt and going into Canaan.
Man, that's a good. I personally don't know. That's an angle that I had not seen. I don't know if Jacob was aware that he was going to get basically a royal funeral.
Sure.
Because like he gets embalmed, which is not the custom of the Israelites or the Hebrews at the time. He gets embalmed like an Egyptian.
Would that have been a big deal to his family, you think?
I don't know. Apparently it wasn't because he got embalmed. It's like, he got embalmed. It's kind of like people nowadays, like they still have issues over like you getting, when you get burnt with fire. Not incinerated, cremated.
Cremated.
People, I actually had this conversation with somebody like, oh, you can't get cremated because God doesn't like it. I'm like, what? Where do you get that?
So hold on real quick. I'm wondering if this is a stretch. You got my mind thinking. Here's a body of an individual who's leaving that land of slavery, yada yada, is going into the promised land, and it's a body that doesn't get subjected to decay in the way that others might have.
A non-embalmed Oh, I know where you're going. Huh. I'm smelling what you're cooking.
Connect the dots for me. Because here's like a first fruits. Here's like the very beginning here's the down payment of the promise, right? They are not living yet within the promise that they are going to inherit the promised land yet. And yet here is the very first, the body that's unique, that's being transferred to the promised land. Connect the dots for those who are not yet there.
If I'm understanding you correctly, if I am smelling your cooking correctly, if I'm smelling it, which I have not thought of that angle, Justin. So we're both just like kind of wondering the possibilities here. This is not for anybody who's listening and is going crazy on heresy. We're like, dude, we're allowed. This we're allowed
to wander.
We're allowed to wander sometimes.
Wonder.
Yeah, and sometimes when we find ourselves outside the text, we're like, oh, stop. I think that there could be, there's a body that doesn't subject itself to decompose, which is corruption, which is what is predicted in the Psalms about Jesus, right? That his body did not see a corruption in the level that, say, Lazarus's body saw corruption. And it is a first fruits that is taken from the place of slavery into the promised land. Is that what you're hinting at? You're hinting at the resurrection, like Jesus leading us from out of slavery into the promised land and him being the first.
That's at least the question that I'm offering. I'm not confident to say that this is what it is, but it sounds a lot like Jesus. And if something that we've learned spending time in the text
is that Jesus is in most of the stories, if not all of them. Like
he's to show up once or twice.
He's the better. He's always the better, right? The better Abraham, the better Isaac, the better Jacob, the better Joseph. That would be a very interesting thing that I think I can see that. We could be off, and if we're off, we're sorry. But so far, I'm liking that. It makes a lot of sense of him going from the place of slavery into the land of the promise, of him. Even though Jacob, like the embalmment is not necessarily you escaping decay. You're still going to decay. Actually, the process of embalming in Egyptian is that they're taking out. They take out certain body parts from you, actually, and they put them in these jars. It's so interesting how they used to do that. Take your brain out, your guts out, your heart out, and they put them in these little jars for the afterlife. It's a completely different custom and a completely different world view when you're embalming somebody. But it's not decay and just bones.
I'm just chuckling because for someone who started off the episode somewhat squeamish about the conversation around death, you're now like, and they take out your organs and your brain and they put it in a jar.
But that's what they did. That's what the Egyptians did.
It's true.
It's fascinating. I find the process of death sometimes fascinating. Not in a macabre way, just in a very curious scientific way. That's all. So I think that there is probably something there where Jacob is prefiguring the experience of Christ, maybe. in that he is taken from one place and placed into the place of promise as a certainty that this will happen, that the liberation will happen, that one day will happen. At first I was thinking, you're kind of hinting at Jacob in his death, sort of prophesying how Israel will leave one day, right? Egypt with incidentally possessions, right? Because this is what Joseph does. He's literally a royal wedding. And so that this was with chariots, and it's described with chariots and it's a big fanfare, and that's how Israel left. Oddly enough, it's the same promise that God makes to Abram. He says, they will serve as strangers in a land, but then I will judge that land, that nation, and they will come out of the nation with a lot of possessions. Yeah. Right. So I thought that that's where you were going first, but then I was like, oh no, you're going 2 steps above the meta narrative, into a possible prefiguration of Christ. Yeah. That would not be, it wouldn't be odd for me if we could find that. So, but I don't have any textual indicators in that direction. So maybe something for the future.
I think this is just what makes this journey fun, right? I was talking to Jonathan earlier this week, and we're just like, dude, how much fun would it be to be able to revisit the book of Romans again? Because we shot that series like 3-ish years ago, and like I love it. I stand behind that journey. Yeah. Learned a lot along the way for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And you get to revisit, and I guess it points out that you can revisit the air quotes old stories and still air quotes get something out of it, right? And it's just like, I don't know. Just I think that this is why I enjoy this show. Yeah, is because it really is less about like, let me make sure that you get to the right answer and get all the right conclusions about the text, which is how the Bible was. How I read the Bible for so many years. This is how I was shown what proper Bible study looked like.
Oh my God, and
cool. Right answers are helpful. There's a lot of utility in a right answer. And I don't know, just being able to just explore and let the Spirit move. That's been the value proposition of the move the entire time. And
I love it because and I think especially in our in our specific community of faith, our Seventh-day Adventist community of faith, for those of us who are Seventh-day Adventists and grew up perhaps with a particular outlook, unintended, I would say in many cases perhaps it's unintended. And it's odd that I've been having this exact conversation. Oh my gosh, I've been having this exact conversation a couple of times this week, and perhaps even participation online about it. But within our specific, community of faith, we are very prone to the right answer always.
Not even the right answer, what we think is the right answer.
Yeah. That's what I mean. What we think is the right answer and what we textually think that the text is saying, which most likely the majority of times I don't find that our set answers are necessarily wrong or incorrect. I think that's the right. They're not necessarily incorrect. But a lot of times we find ourselves limiting other possibilities within the text. And that especially happens when we add this parallel, how do I say this parallel resource that we have, in the writings of a very prolific author that Adventists have. And many times we treat that as the only answer to have. And well, if you read the text, which is what this author would have said, she would have said, actually, read the text. Don't read my books. Read the text. If we would read the text with open hearts and open eyes and the Spirit guiding us as it was intended, we would be getting so much more depth into this. I think going Romans, I think that's right. I was about to say we could revisit John.
Yeah, we could.
Right? Like
maybe complete the incomplete series.
Oh, John was incomplete? Because I know you did John.
We did season 2 around John, but we made it about 3/4 of the way into the season before COVID hit. And Jonathan and I were shooting in person while living in separate states. And so it just didn't work out.
Oh, yeah. No, John is a beautiful book.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, I'm looking at the time.
Yes.
And not that I was opposed to...
We're way past 10 minutes.
But we're at 25 now. But since this is the last time that we get to hang out for this season of the move, I just wanted... This is something I'm doing with all of our guests thus far. Just closing thoughts, closing words, parting advice or wisdom. Just being able to talk to people that we've now successfully journeyed. I think if you're listening to this specific minute in the episode, on episode number 86,
wow,
like they're committed to the journey. I'm just wondering, for those people in particular, just any reflections, thoughts, parting advice or wisdom that you'd like to share.
Yes, read the text. It's beautiful. Read the text. If somebody tells you that the Bible is hard and that you can't understand it, you gotta say, no, it didn't work.
Oh, that was anticlimactic. I saw you preparing for it.
It was supposed to say no. No, but if somebody tells you can't...
Hold on, if you're only listening to that, you didn't know what was going on. He pulled up a physical button that has no words on it, and it says no.
Ooh, yeah, look at the battery on that thing.
No, it's all corroded.
It's all corroded. Gross. Anyways, I was going to say...
The button was supposed to say no.
It was supposed to say no. It's really fun. It's one of my fun little trinkets in my office. But if you're supposed to say no, say no. No, the Bible, you can read the Bible. You can understand the Bible. The Bible is a book that was written not necessarily as I heard this preacher say it the other day, and I thought it was beautiful.
Basic instructions before leaving Earth?
Yeah. Yeah.
He only left you basic instructions before leaving Earth.
Yeah,
Holy
no.
Bible.
Yeah, the Bible is not that. The Bible is not a rule book by which God is... That's what he was saying. The Bible is not a rule book by which God is trying to boss you around, but is actually a story in which he narrates to you how he has liberated you, how he has freed you. And a lot of times I'm paraphrasing what this preacher said. A lot of times we're so used to looking at the cell up close, right? With the bars up close, that we have not realized that the door has been blown open a while long ago. And that's really what the Bible does. The Bible is not just, this basic instructions before you leave Earth, which is, cutesy and cheesy, but it's really this beautiful narrative, as we've seen right here in the movie. Just in Genesis. Like just in Genesis, nice. Just in Genesis, we have seen this beautiful this narrative that is showing this beautiful concept of promise and freedom, and that's just in the first book. Can you imagine what else you could do in the other 65 books if we could just spend time in the text? Don't be scared of the text. Let the Spirit teach you, let the Spirit guide you, and listen to the text. Read the text with new eyes, because there's nothing more awesome than just reading the story over and over again and discovering that he has done something for us. He has promised something. He has done it, and he is going to fulfill the fullness of this promise of freedom and liberation. And it's not just our bones that are going to be carried to the promised land. It's us. You can't go wrong with the Bible, man. It's beautiful.
Well said. Harold, thank you so much for jumping on, for being a part of this journey.
Thanks for the
very
invite,
grateful
man.
to spend the time with you, man.
I've been honored to be part of this thing, and I'm thankful and grateful for the invitation you extended. So thank you for making it possible.
Oh, absolutely. That's it for this episode, guys. We will see you in the very last episode of the season.
coming on up.